Hello everybody and welcome to this video. Before we get in and start talking about John Wick Hex, which is the game we are looking at today, I just wanted to mention that you may have noticed a new little intro clip on the videos. We are doing things a little bit differently now. I thought it was time to jazz things up a bit now that we've hit 1,000 subscribers, and it was time to take the next step with the channel. So hopefully you enjoyed that. You'll be seeing it quite a lot in the future, I imagine, or hope anyway. I hope you stick with us. And yeah, it was fun to put together. So anyway, let's talk about John Wick Hex. This is a game that has been developed by Mike Bithell of Bithell Games. He's probably best known for Thomas Was Alone, but he is one of the stronger indie devs out there. He's worked on stuff including Volume, Subsurface Circular, Quarantine Circular, and now John Wick Hex, which is by far his biggest property because it is a licensed title based on the very popular movie trilogy. And I wasn't sure how he would go with it, to be honest. That's not a comment on Mike Bithell's talents as a developer, because I knew that he can make a good game, that's for certain. But John Wick is a particular property, and I wasn't sure that it would be possible to adapt to video game form, let alone by an indie. I had in my mind that if they were going to be able to do a John Wick game, it would be this big blockbuster thing with very Devil May Cry style action, very pacey, very active, very violent, very big budget. And the reason I thought that was simply because of the movies. If you watch the movies, there's barely a moment to breathe in them. They are just one long action scene with a couple of moments where they might talk briefly, usually to take in some lovely sights, because the settings in these games are amazing and exotic. But if you were to think of John Wick a bit like the American James Bond, that's the best way to think of it, I think. It is a very honest American Hollywood blockbuster tale in which action is extreme, violence is plentiful and unending, and the movie series is very honest about that. And that's why I actually quite like John Wick, because I have my issues with how Hollywood does a lot of its stuff, but John Wick has this honesty to it, and I just didn't think that that was going to translate particularly well to a video game. Again, particularly when you're looking at the indie space where they don't have the kind of resources to do that big action blockbuster stuff. I am very happy to say that Mike Bithell has absolutely nailed it in the least expected way that you could come up with, because this is a tactics game and you just don't think about tactics and big action working together, but somehow he's managed to make this work. The basic idea of it is that it is a very streamlined tactics game where you move around a grid, which is represented by the little dots that you're seeing on the screen there in front of you, and you regularly come up across enemies. There's a couple of different actions you can take. You can melee them down, you can shoot at them, and that's really kind of it. There's a little bit more nuance to it later on, because you need to consider the direction that you're knocking your opponents down when they're in melee distance. There is things like focus and wounds, obviously, to monitor as well. If John Wick takes too many wounds, he dies. If he runs out of focus, then he can't perform an awful lot of actions. You can also crouch down to get a better accuracy when you do an attack, or that's particularly when you're shooting a gun. And those are kinds of the limits of what you can do. And at first it feels like it might be too limited for its own good. But then you get into the rhythm of it and you realize that this is a very rhythmical turn-based strategy game in which you are constantly pressured to move forward quite quickly, and actually you're rewarded for doing so. So one of the ways that you get rewarded is that enemies, you don't tend to have too much ammunition to work with. Your guns run out of bullets quite quickly. The only way to find new bullets is to take out an enemy and grab their gun, but usually there's not that many bullets in those guns either. So while you start the map with quite a lot of bullets, quickly you run out of them. And this is compounded by the fact that you don't just play one map, you play a series of maps, and that's very much like the movie as well. So if you've seen the movies, then you know that they tend to be very elongated series of actions which go for many minutes and often go across a couple of different settings, and it's just relentless. The way they've reflected that in this game is that you need to play back-to-back 5 or 6 missions in a row, or maps in a row, and your health and ammunition doesn't reset between those maps. So the flow is there. It feels very much like they've emulated the flow of the action in the movie series by doing so with the games. Now, to come back to what I was saying with the bullets, by the time you're into the third or fourth map within this sequence, you're really worried about how you're going to preserve the ammunition, because you know the boss is coming up and you know you're going to need a lot of resources in order to defeat that boss. And one way to do that is to move forward quickly, because enemies do come in waves and they do tend to appear behind you. The best way to avoid having to shoot them down and waste resources or perhaps health in doing so is to simply keep moving until you get to the exit quite quickly. So this game, although it's a tactics strategy game, really does encourage you to keep moving and keep moving fast and make minimal use of your bullets. So you're also encouraged to really kind of charge at the enemy so you can take them down in a melee attack and save a couple more bullets. Now, the other benefit to playing quickly is that you get a pass score at the end of a series of maps. So at the end of an entire stage as such, they give you a breakdown of basically how well you've performed, how many bullets you've used, what accuracy you've shot at, and critically, how quickly you've done it. So the game tracks in-game time and overall time played separately. The overall time played doesn't really matter, so if you take your time between missions or whatever, that's fine. But the actual time that you spend in the maps, you need to move quite quickly because there is a pass score to beat there. And that's a real incentive to, again, move quickly and play very much like you would if John Wick was playing a strategy game. If you were to condense the action of those movies into something turn-based, but still want to preserve the feel of the speed of the action, then this is how you do it. It's really impressive. I am just so amazed. I really did not have many expectations going into this game, but within a couple of minutes I was fully absorbed within it. It also helps that it's gorgeous in a very distinct and creative way. You will notice in the replays that I've been playing in these clips, things look a little bit clumsy, and that's because they're a precise remake of the movement of the characters through the turn-based stuff. So the little replay clips you get are exact replays. But where this game is really impressive is when you're looking down from this top-down perspective and you're seeing this kind of minimalist, cool, noirish vibe with a very clever use of very bold colours to again re-emphasize that noirish feel. And that is also very John Wick, because John Wick is very slick but very minimalist in presentation, and you look at some of the kind of exotic locations that John Wick attends, and the art direction of those tends to be very bold and clean, because they want you to focus on the action. There's not that kind of elaborate depth to a lot of the sets. They tend to be kind of open spaces where a lot of action and a lot of violence can happen quite quickly. This game does a great job of capturing that vibe, again with a very minimalist budget, very indie budget game, but just absolutely spot on for recapturing the license. Ultimately, that is what is really the strength of this game. There are a lot of licensed games, of course, and indies these days make quite a few of them because the big budget guys don't tend to want to. You either get mobile titles for licensed tie-ins, or you get indies making them. And a couple of months ago, there was a Dark Crystal tactics game that was released. And it also is a tactics strategy game, that's right there in the title, but it failed to capture the appeal of Dark Crystal on any level. It was just a very dull tactics game that just happened to vaguely look like the stuff that we'd seen on the Netflix show. And it was very disappointing. Because the thing is, when you're playing with a person's license, a favourite license, like Dark Crystal, like John Wick, if you mess it up, then it just hits that much harder, and you enjoy the game even less. And a good example of that is yet another Netflix thing that was turned into a game, this time not a tactics game, but an RPG nonetheless, the Stranger Things thing. I was a huge fan of Stranger Things, or I am a huge fan of Stranger Things. And I went into the game in good faith because I thought it was going to be at least some kind of reflection of what I loved about the TV show. And it isn't on any level, it's just a really bad game. And if it was just a normal bad game, I'd just go and move on. But because it was something that I really cared about, a property that I'd really loved watching and has actually, watched multiple times, I really love Stranger Things. Because it was that property, I was that much more disappointed with it, which made the game even worse in my opinion. So the stakes are quite high when you're working with properties, with licensed properties. And indies really, they often work from one game to the next, where, the next one might be their last if they don't do a good enough job with it. So the pressure was quite high on Mike Bithell to get this one right, and I'm very glad to say he has. And I think this is an amazing little bit of gameplay. I think it's an amazing work, so definitely check it out if you get the chance. All right. I'll also have a review going up on digitallydownloaded.net, so check that out as well. It'll go into more depth about stuff I like about this game rather than just kind of a broad overview. Otherwise, please do like and subscribe, and if you enjoy my videos, of course, don't if you don't, but I do hope you enjoy my videos. And if you do want to back me on Patreon, there is a link there in the description underneath. That would really help because I've got big plans for this channel, and it should go a lot more than just a new intro screen. So let's see we can take this. Thanks very much as always for watching, and we will see you at the next video.